The internet is in absolute chaos right now after new movement in the long-running tension between Drake and Kendrick Lamar started circulating online, and fans are convinced something major is unfolding behind the scenes. Clips, tweets, and supposed insider reactions have been spreading across social media claiming that Drake has finally responded in some form to Kendrick's recent lyrical shots, and the reaction from fans has been explosive. Some people are saying this is the calm before a much bigger storm, while others believe the entire situation is being overhyped by the internet once again. What's making this moment even more intense is how divided the fan base has become. On one side, Drake supporters are analyzing every possible hint, every lyric, every post, trying to decode whether there's a hidden message or indirect clapback being aimed back at Kendrick. On the other side, Kendrick fans are confident that he already set the tone with his previous statements and don't believe Drake needs to respond at all. But here's where things get even more interesting, because now fans are not just talking about music anymore. They're talking about strategy, timing, and silence. Why hasn't a direct response dropped yet? Is Drake building towards something bigger? Or is the internet simply creating a narrative that doesn't fully exist? Even major commentators and reaction channels are jumping in, breaking down old interviews, analyzing lyrics, and revisiting past diss moments like they hold hidden clues to what's happening right now. Every frame is being studied, every word is being dissected, and every silence is being treated like a statement. As the speculation grows, one question is taking over the entire conversation. Did Drake really respond to Kendrick in a way nobody expected? And is this the moment that could shift the entire battle narrative? Or is the internet once again turning rumors into reality? Either way, the tension between Drake and Kendrick Lamar has the culture locked in, and what happens next could either confirm the hype or completely flip it upside down. The tension between Drake and Kendrick Lamar has once again become one of the most discussed topics in hip-hop culture, with fans dissecting every move, every lyric, and every silence as if it carries hidden meaning. What started as competitive energy between two of the biggest names in the industry has now evolved into a full-scale cultural moment where even the smallest details are treated like potential clues. Social media platforms like TikTok, X, Twitter, and YouTube are now flooded with breakdowns, theories, and reaction clips claiming to interpret what either artist might be planning next. But what makes this phase of the conversation so intense is that much of it is driven by interpretation rather than confirmed action. The audience is no longer just reacting to music, they are reacting to possibility. In the middle of all this noise, the narrative around Drake has become especially complicated. Fans are convinced that he is either preparing a calculated response or deliberately choosing silence as a strategy. Every small move he makes online is now being analyzed. A simple post, a lyric repost, or even a subtle shift in tone becomes fuel for speculation. Some supporters believe Drake is in a position where he is carefully planning a response that will shift the conversation entirely. Others argue that he may not need to respond at all, suggesting that the current climate already speaks for itself. This division among fans has created a constant cycle of debate, where every new rumor or clip reignites the discussion and pushes it further into trending territory. At the same time, Kendrick Lamar continues to be viewed as the other half of this unfolding narrative. His approach has always been seen as strategic and layered, which leads many fans to believe that anything he says or does carries deeper meaning. Because of this, even silence from Kendrick is interpreted in multiple ways. Some fans see it as confidence, an indication that he has already made his point. Others view it as preparation for something bigger still to come. This uncertainty is what keeps the conversation alive. Without clear closure, the audience fills in the gaps with theories, predictions, and breakdowns that often spread faster than verified facts. As the speculation continues to grow, content creators and reaction channels have fully entered the conversation. YouTube breakdown videos are now analyzing old interviews, past lyrics, and even unrelated moments from years ago in an attempt to connect them to the current situation. TikTok edits slow down audio clips and highlight specific words, suggesting hidden meanings that may or may not exist. On X, users are creating thread-long theories, trying to map out a timeline of events that could explain where the tension is headed next. The result is a constantly expanding ecosystem of interpretation where every piece of content feeds into the next. Even small comments from fans can turn into viral talking points within hours. Meanwhile, audiences are becoming increasingly emotionally invested in the idea that something major is about to happen. This anticipation is part of what makes the situation so engaging. People aren't just reacting to what has already been released. They are waiting for what comes next. That expectation creates a sense of suspense that keeps engagement high across platforms. Every rumor of a response or diss immediately spreads, even before being confirmed. And in many cases, the excitement around the possibility becomes more viral than the actual music itself. However, not everyone is convinced that anything significant is happening at all. A growing group of listeners argue that the internet is overanalyzing the situation and turning normal artistic expression into an exaggerated narrative. They point out that both Drake and Kendrick Lamar have always operated within complex lyrical styles, and not every line or silence is necessarily part of a larger conflict. From this perspective, much of the current discussion is being driven by fan interpretation rather than actual new developments. Still, despite the skepticism, the conversation continues to grow. The combination of two globally recognized artists, a history of competitive energy, and an audience hungry for meaning has created the perfect environment for speculation, whether or not a real response has even happened in the way fans are suggesting. The narrative itself has already taken on a life of its own. And in the world of modern hip-hop culture, sometimes the perception of movement is just as powerful as the movement itself. As the online debates surrounding Drake and Kendrick Lamar continue to intensify, the conversation started shifting from simple speculation into full-blown analysis culture. Fans were no longer just asking if a response existed. They were trying to map out what kind of response it could be, where it might appear, and how it would change the current balance of attention in hip-hop. This kind of breakdown mentality has become a defining feature of modern music fandom, where listeners act almost like detectives, pulling meaning from every corner of an artist's public presence. In this case, the uncertainty surrounding both artists has turned the entire internet into a constantly updating theory board. One of the biggest drivers of this moment is the way fans interpret silence. In previous eras of rap rivalry, silence was often just silence. But now, in the streaming and social media age, silence itself becomes content. When Drake doesn't immediately respond in a direct way, it is read by some fans as strategy. They believe he may be calculating timing, waiting for the perfect moment to drop something that dominates the conversation. Others interpret it differently, arguing that not every situation requires a response and that forcing one could actually weaken his position. This split in interpretation keeps the discussion active because there is no single agreed-upon meaning behind an action. On the other side, Kendrick Lamar is viewed through a very different lens. Fans tend to treat his work as layered and intentional, which leads to a different kind of speculation entirely. Even without new releases, people revisit older material, looking for hidden references that might connect to the current moment. Lines that once felt unrelated are now being re-examined under a new context. This retrospective analysis creates the illusion that the situation is constantly evolving, even when nothing new has officially dropped. In reality, it is the audience reinterpreting existing content to fit a developing narrative. This interpretive cycle has been amplified heavily by content creators and commentary channels. On YouTube, long-form breakdown videos have started resurfacing past interviews, award show moments, and lyric deep dives, attempting to connect dots between the two artists that may or may not actually exist. On TikTok, short clips paired with dramatic soundtracks suggest hidden meanings in older songs, giving the impression that there are secret messages being uncovered in real time. Meanwhile, X, Twitter, users are building thread after thread analyzing timelines, interactions, and industry relationships. The result is a constantly expanding web of content where every post feeds into the larger story, regardless of whether it is based on new information or recycled interpretation. At the same time, fan emotions are becoming a major part of the narrative. Supporters of both artists are deeply invested, not just in the music itself, but in the idea of victory, dominance, and cultural impact. For some listeners, this is no longer just about songs. It's about legacy. That emotional investment makes every rumor feel important. A small hint, an interview quote, or even a change in social media behavior can trigger massive waves of discussion. People aren't simply consuming music anymore. They are tracking momentum, trying to predict who holds the upper hand in the public perception battle. This is also why speculation about a potential response from Drake has become so widespread. Fans believe that if a response is coming, it will not be random. It will be calculated, timed, and structured to shift attention instantly. Some expect a direct musical response, while others believe it could come in a more indirect form, such as collaborations, interviews, or strategic releases that change the narrative without explicitly addressing anything. The uncertainty around format adds another layer of suspense, because it leaves room for endless prediction. Meanwhile, others argue that the situation may not escalate in the way people expect. They point out that the music industry often thrives on cycles of hype, and sometimes the biggest response is simply continuing forward without acknowledging the noise. From this perspective, both Drake and Kendrick Lamar are already operating at such a high level that direct confrontation may not even be necessary for either of them to maintain their positions. Instead, their influence is measured through impact, streams, and cultural reach rather than constant back-and-forth exchanges. Despite these differing opinions, one thing remains consistent. The conversation is not slowing down. Every new day brings fresh interpretations, revived clips, and reanalyzed moments from the past. Whether or not a real response has actually happened in the way fans are describing, the narrative itself continues to grow through collective engagement. And in today's digital music culture, that engagement is often enough to keep a story alive far longer than any single release ever could. As the conversation around Drake and Kendrick Lamar continued to dominate online spaces, the narrative began shifting again, this time into a phase where fans were actively treating speculation like unfolding reality. Instead of waiting for confirmed music or official statements, audiences started building entire timelines of possible responses, mapping out scenarios where one move from either artist could completely flip the direction of the discussion. This is where modern hip-hop culture becomes less about actual releases and more about perception, anticipation, and collective interpretation. The audience becomes the engine that drives the story forward, even when the artists themselves are not actively engaging in the public back and forth. A major reason this situation continues to expand is the way fans interpret timing. In the current digital landscape, timing is treated almost like coded communication. When Drake goes quiet, some fans assume it is part of a larger plan. They believe silence is being used strategically, giving space for anticipation to build before a major drop. Others argue that the silence is being overread, pointing out that artists often focus on multiple projects simultaneously and do not always respond immediately to public speculation. This disagreement fuels endless discussion, because both interpretations feel plausible depending on how someone views the situation. As a result, every hour without a new release becomes part of the narrative itself. On the opposite side, Kendrick Lamar continues to be analyzed through a lens of depth and intentionality. Fans often assume that his creative output is layered with meaning, which leads to constant reevaluation of his past work. Even older verses, interviews, and performances are being revisited and reinterpreted in light of current discussions. This creates a phenomenon where nothing in his catalog feels static anymore. Everything becomes potentially relevant again. A lyric that once had a simple meaning is now re-examined, as if it contains hidden references to ongoing narratives. This type of retrospective analysis keeps the conversation alive even when there is no new material being released. At the same time, social media creators have become key drivers in shaping how the situation is understood. Commentary channels on YouTube are producing long breakdowns that attempt to connect dots between past events and current speculation. Some videos focus on analyzing lyrical patterns, suggesting that certain themes may hint at ongoing rivalry dynamics. Others revisit interviews and public appearances, trying to identify subtle shifts in tone or messaging. On TikTok, the approach is faster and more emotional. Short clips, dramatic edits, and caption theories designed to spark immediate reaction. Meanwhile, X, Twitter, threads present structured arguments that map out evidence in chronological order, often presenting theories as if they are investigative reports. Together, these platforms create a constant stream of interpretation that feeds into itself, making the narrative feel like it is always evolving. What makes this cycle especially powerful is how audiences respond emotionally. Fans are not just observing the situation, they are participating in it. Many feel invested in the idea that something significant is about to happen, and that emotional expectation drives continued engagement. Every rumor, no matter how small, becomes amplified as users share and debate it. A single post suggesting a possible response from Drake can quickly spread across platforms, generating thousands of reactions within hours. Whether or not the claim is accurate often becomes secondary to the excitement it generates. This is how modern viral narratives sustain themselves, through repetition, reaction, and emotional investment rather than confirmed information. At the same time, skepticism remains present in the discussion. Some listeners argue that the entire situation is being exaggerated by online culture. They believe that not every artistic decision needs to be interpreted as part of a rivalry, and that constant analysis can distort the actual intent behind music. From this perspective, both Drake and Kendrick Lamar are seen as artists whose work should be appreciated independently rather than constantly filtered through a competitive lens. This group often pushes back against theories circulating online, encouraging audiences to focus on confirmed releases rather than speculation. Despite this pushback, the speculative narrative continues to dominate. The combination of two globally influential artists, a history of competitive energy, and a highly engaged online audience creates the perfect environment for ongoing discussion. Even without a confirmed response, the idea of one is enough to sustain attention. And in the current digital era, perception often carries as much weight as reality. The conversation doesn't need closure to continue, it only needs momentum. As long as fans keep analyzing, debating, and predicting, the narrative between Drake and Kendrick Lamar will remain active, constantly reshaped by the audience that follows it. As the discussion around Drake and Kendrick Lamar continued to evolve online, the conversation reached a point where the narrative was being driven almost entirely by audience interpretation rather than any confirmed new developments. Fans were no longer just reacting to music. They were actively constructing meaning from absence, timing, and past behavior. Every silence, every repost, and every old lyric was being pulled into the current moment as if it carried direct relevance. This shift is what has turned the situation from a typical music rivalry discussion into a continuous cultural analysis loop, where the audience itself keeps the story alive. One of the most discussed ideas in this phase is the concept of invisible response. Many fans believe that if Drake has not dropped a direct track or statement, it does not necessarily mean there is no response. Instead, they speculate that the response may exist in indirect forms, strategic silence, subtle industry moves, or even unrelated releases that carry hidden meaning. This kind of thinking turns ordinary actions into potential clues. A song release that has nothing explicitly to do with the rivalry can suddenly be interpreted as part of a larger plan. Even promotional decisions, album timing, or social media activity are analyzed as if they contain coded messages. This creates a situation where almost anything can be connected to the narrative if viewed through the right lens. On the other hand, Kendrick Lamar is often framed as an artist whose work naturally invites deeper interpretation, which adds another layer to the ongoing speculation. Fans frequently revisit his catalog, searching for lyrical connections that could be recontextualized in light of current discussions. This retrospective analysis means that even older songs feel newly relevant again. Lines that were written years ago are being examined under present-day assumptions, as if they were always intended to reflect current events. This type of interpretation doesn't require new music. It only requires a new perspective from the audience. As a result, Kendrick's existing work becomes a constantly expanding source of potential meaning within the ongoing conversation. Content creators have played a major role in accelerating this process. On YouTube, long-form analysis videos are breaking down entire discographies, attempting to identify patterns, themes, and lyrical parallels that might connect to the present narrative. Some creators present their findings as investigative breakdowns, while others approach it more like cultural commentary, emphasizing interpretation over certainty. On TikTok, the approach is faster and more emotionally driven. Short clips paired with dramatic edits, slowed audio, and on-screen text suggesting hidden meanings or upcoming events. These videos often go viral quickly, not because they provide confirmed information, but because they create excitement and curiosity. Meanwhile, X, Twitter, continues to function as a real-time theory hub, where users debate timelines, share screenshots, and construct detailed threads attempting to map out the situation step by step. As this ecosystem grows, audience engagement becomes the fuel that sustains it. Fans actively participate in shaping the narrative by sharing theories, reacting to clips, and debating interpretations. This level of participation makes the situation feel alive, even in the absence of new official developments. The more people engage, the more platforms push related content, which in turn exposes even more users to the ongoing discussion. This cycle ensures that the topic remains visible across feeds, trending sections, and recommendation algorithms. In this environment, attention itself becomes the driving force behind the story's continuation. At the same time, emotional investment plays a significant role in how the situation is perceived. For many fans, the rivalry between Drake and Kendrick Lamar is not just about music. It represents broader ideas like artistic legacy, cultural dominance, and influence within hip-hop. This emotional layer makes every development feel important. A rumored response is not just a song. It becomes a potential turning point in how people understand the entire dynamic between two of the most influential artists of their generation. This is why speculation spreads so quickly. It taps into existing emotional stakes that fans already carry. However, not everyone agrees with the direction the conversation has taken. A growing segment of listeners argues that the internet is overanalyzing the situation and creating meaning where there may be none. From this perspective, not every silence is strategic, and not every lyric is part of a hidden message. They suggest that modern fandom culture has become too focused on decoding everything, often at the expense of simply enjoying the music. This group emphasizes that both Drake and Kendrick Lamar are established artists capable of operating independently of constant public back-and-forth narratives. In their view, the current speculation reflects more about online behavior than it does about actual artistic intent. Despite these differing opinions, the conversation shows no sign of slowing down. The combination of two major global artists, a history of competitive energy, and an audience deeply invested in interpretation ensures that every new detail, real or imagined, becomes part of the larger story. Whether or not a true response has actually occurred in the way fans believe, the narrative continues to grow through discussion, analysis, and speculation. And in today's digital culture, that ongoing engagement is often enough to keep a story alive indefinitely, reshaping it continuously with every new wave of attention. As the tension between Drake and Kendrick Lamar escalated, the industry began to feel the ripple effects. It wasn't just the fans and social media reacting. Labels, promoters, and even collaborators were paying attention. Executives at streaming platforms noticed spikes in engagement, with streams for both artists' catalogs surging as listeners tried to catch every potential reference or hidden diss. Curiously, this included tracks from years prior, proving that the rivalry wasn't just shaping the present, it was retroactively redefining the past. Every verse, every hook, every subtle nod in a beat was dissected as if it carried new weight. Playlists with titles like Drake vs. Kendrick, Hidden Shots began trending, accumulating millions of streams within hours. The numbers alone confirmed that whether or not there was a real feud, the audience had created one. Meanwhile, the artists themselves seemed to understand the power of perception. Drake, for instance, maintained a cool, almost detached posture online. There were no impulsive tweets, no sudden live sessions, no public spats. Instead, he allowed his music, timing, and selective public appearances to do the talking. Each release or statement was analyzed by fans and critics for hidden meanings, whether intentional or not. It became clear that controlling the narrative didn't require direct confrontation. It required strategic restraint and an understanding of how attention operates in the digital era. Fans and observers noted that every subtle nod in an interview, every reposted image, and every track's title could be leveraged to sustain the hype. On the other hand, Kendrick Lamar took a different approach, leaning into the artistry of his responses. Where Drake relied on perception and timing, Kendrick's moves were more layered, lyrical, and deliberate. Each potential reference in his music was dense with metaphor and multi-level wordplay, making it difficult to separate casual listeners from those doing a deeper analysis. You could hear fan theories expanding with every line, as commentators dissected syllables, rhyme patterns, and historical references to uncover potential shots at Drake. It wasn't about instant gratification. Kendrick's style demanded patience, context, and knowledge of his catalog, which made the debate richer and more complex. The online community split into factions, some praising Kendrick's artistry, others lauding Drake's strategic calm, and many caught somewhere in between, analyzing every interaction for hidden meaning. This ongoing engagement created a unique cultural phenomenon. Music critics, YouTubers, podcasters, and TikTok creators were no longer reporting. They were co-creating the narrative. Viral clips analyzing bars, fan polls measuring who had the better diss, and memes framing imagined scenarios spread like wildfire. One notable instance involved a fan-made video that combined lyrics from Kendrick's 2015 release with Drake's 2026 lines, highlighting thematic parallels and indirect shots. That video quickly went viral, drawing millions of views and sparking debates across platforms. The lines between original content and audience interpretation blurred entirely. It became increasingly difficult to tell who was influencing the conversation more, the artists themselves or the fans who were reconstructing the story around them. In addition to cultural analysis, the rivalry began affecting commercial aspects. Concert attendance, merchandise sales, and streaming subscriptions surged, and brands sought to leverage the buzz. Music festivals promoted events highlighting both artists' catalogs, and streaming services featured curated playlists centered on the imagined feud. The attention economy surrounding this battle proved incredibly profitable for all parties, including platforms and media outlets. Even casual listeners who might not have engaged with either artist's music were drawn in simply to follow the unfolding story. Essentially, the competition became as much about perception, branding, and entertainment as it was about the music itself. By the end of this cycle, it was evident that the Drake-Kendrick dynamic had transcended traditional rivalry. The tension had become an ongoing, interactive spectacle where fans, critics, and creators all contributed to the narrative. Music no longer existed in isolation. It was inseparable from the audience's interpretation. Every track, interview, and social media post became potential evidence in a larger story, and the story itself evolved constantly with each new wave of engagement. Whether or not a definitive response ever emerged, the impact was undeniable. Both artists had succeeded in captivating a global audience, driving discourse, and solidifying their legacies not just through talent, but through an unmatched mastery of narrative, perception, and timing. In this sense, the rivalry continues to live not only in the music but in the cultural consciousness. Fans will speculate, dissect, and theorize indefinitely, and each new song, post, or live appearance adds another layer to the story. The real power of this saga lies in its ongoing nature, the way it blends artistry, strategy, and audience participation into a perpetual cycle. For anyone observing from the outside, it is a masterclass in modern celebrity, influence, and cultural engagement. The Drake versus Kendrick moment has become more than a feud. It is a living narrative that reflects the intersection of artistry, strategy, and the modern digital audience. And as long as fans remain invested, the story will continue to unfold, endlessly evolving and keeping the world watching. Before you scroll away, one thing is clear. This whole Drake versus Kendrick situation isn't just about music anymore. It's about influence, timing, and how the internet turns every move into a global debate. Whether you think Drake is silently calculating his next move or Kendrick Lamar already set the tone with his lyrical precision, The truth is the culture is watching every detail like it's history being written in real time. Now the real question is, who do you think has the upper hand right now? Is Drake playing the long game with strategy and silence? Or is Kendrick already ahead with every bar and hidden message fans keep decoding? Drop your opinion in the comments because this debate is far from over, and every new drop could change everything instantly. And if you want more deep breakdowns like this, covering beefs, hidden meanings, and industry moves, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. Because in this game, the story never stops, it only evolves.